Alrighty then. It's 8 o'clock. That means, it's 8 o'clock on Monday night, and that means it's time once again for a little Twitch online live office hour for World Regional Geography, aka World Regions. The goofiest class here at Virginia Tech, home of the Fighting Hokies. How about those Lady Hokies in basketball? Are we going to make it? Are we going to make it? Are we going to make it to the Final Four? Can we make it to the top slot? I don't know, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. I'm not so smart about sports. But what I was going to talk about tonight was turbulence around Taiwan. Not even turbulence in Taiwan. Turbulence around Taiwan. All of a sudden, in the last 48 hours, I've seen a slurry, a flurry, a snowstorm of stories about Taiwan. And so I thought, hey, let's talk about Taiwan on Monday night office hours. But before we go any further, as I am wont to do, can I get a shout out? Is there anybody in this chat room right now? Is there anybody tuned in to the online office hours right now? And if so, can you both hear me and see me here on the Plaid Avenger Twitch channel? And I will give some good students or some great former students a moment to respond to that request. Oh, there we go. That didn't take any time at all. M. Wafar 3 is in the house saying yes, sir. Ethan Owens 23. Go Hokies. Back to M. Wafar, who says, gotta go at 9 though, so to watch the game. Are we playing tonight? 9. Oh, that's right, because they're playing in Seattle.
No.
So,
Is it?
I think so. Hey, M. Wafar, where's the game at? Is it in Seattle? That's why it's so late, because 3-hour time difference, so it's prime time, 6 o'clock there. Olivia W. is back in the house. Welcome back, Olivia, who says, yep, I can hear and see you. That's right, I got it. M. Waffer says, tonight, Seattle, 9 p.m. The Lady Hokies will dominate, or at least win. That'd be great. First time chatter from Ethan Boyd 6 that says, the Elite 8. That's right, it's the first time the Hokies have made it into the Elite 8. This is great. It's great to be in the Elite 8. Even though it says versus Ohio State, so I don't know much about sports, obviously. So what are our odds? What is everybody feeling? Are the Lady Hokies going to pull it off tonight? Anyone? What are the odds? What are we feeling? What's it looking like? What do we believe is getting ready to happen? I don't know. I've only seen a few games, and I know it's the power guard is who's the awesome one. I'm terrible with names too. I always mean to look up famous players' names because they're likely in this class right now, but I don't know who anybody is, and I certainly don't know if they're in the class unless I specifically go look it up. But Ethan Owens is tracking back saying, I think Vegas has Tech at a 2-point favorite. Well, alrighty then. Let's smash some Buckeyes into some Ohio hummus. You heard it here first. M. Water says could go either way, though. That is always true in basketball, especially college basketball. James Dean Yale saying, hey. Although he is not Fat Albert. M. Water 3 says, but if Georgia Moore. There it is, Georgia Moore. Is it a more? Because to say it like amore means love in Italian. Is it pronounced amore? Because that's delightful. If Georgia Moore is shooting the 3, well, Tech's got it. That's the young lady I was talking about. I've only watched a couple games, and she dominated both. So I'm like, who is that person? And is she in our class right now? Why do I ask that? So I can give her extra credit. Oh, let's just say this, too. Everybody who's tuning in tonight, and someone will have to remind me about this at the end of the game tonight. Everyone who tunes in to the office hour tonight will... they'll be sponsored by Georgia Amore, and every 3-point shot she makes, I will give everyone in this class 1 more point of extra credit. So somebody tell me what the tally is, what the extra credit damage will be at the end of the night, because that'll be fun if she does dominate, and you all will win even more. Okay, well, As we get going tonight in our casual chat, which I'm sure fewer and fewer of you are attending, because as we get closer to the end of the semester, virtually everyone's got an A already. All the cool kids already have an A in world regions, so they don't tune in as much to the office hour. But that's okay if you don't have an A, and it's okay if you don't tune into office hours. But I know the herd gets thinner and thinner as we get closer to the end of the semester, and that's okay because that means the folks that are tuning in are the hardcore wannabe learners. And they're going to know what's going on, even if they already got an A, even if they already graduated from Virginia Tech. So welcome, everyone, and let's talk about current events. What do you guys got going on planet Earth that's caught your eye before I break into some Taiwan antics that have caught my eye? First time chatter says, first time chatter from Koo-Truck. Koo-Truck. I like it. Koo-Truck says, I'm not even a student. Thank you for tuning in, Koo-Truck. And Mr. Manolo times 2. There's 2 non-students in here. Hey, we welcome all types here, students and non-students. I do that in the dialect. It's a quote from a movie of the olden times, if you're my age, but see if anybody can get this movie quote. Oh, we got both types of music here, country and Western. Can anybody name the movie on that for 3 points extra credit? Okay. So what is going on in the world that's caught your eye that you might have a question about, or just in general, you're like, what's the deal with that? Isn't that strange? You guys got anything? Okay. Well, I'll just get to it and do it. What I was going to talk about then. I haven't even gotten anybody to get the movie quote yet. That's a little surprising to me, but it is an old movie. I am old, and it's an old movie. So, what I was intrigued about in the last 48 hours, and it just keeps kind of popping back up, is what's going on in Taiwan? And really not even what's going on in Taiwan. It truly is what's going on around Taiwan. There's lots of things that are occurring all of a sudden that aren't necessarily occurring in the state. They're occurring in other countries, but it has a lot to do with Taiwan. So just doing a basic keyword search. Brown Miller Group back in the Hizzle. Welcome back. Brown Miller says, what's the deal with China and Russia? Did we talk about that last week? Is that what we were talking about? It was the big meeting with China and Russia. The deal with Russia and China is that they are tightening their embrace of each other. I'm going to call it the dictatorial duo of planet Earth. Ooh, I just made that up. That sounds pretty good, though. The dictatorial duo are at the altar ready to get married. And the dictatorial duo are, of course, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping. They are, again, dictators has usually a negative connotation. In this case, I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative connotation. You can call them one-party state leaders. You can call them the penultimate autocrats if you want. But they are extremely powerful leaders of one-party states that have drawn all power to themselves. And so it's hard to not call that a dictatorship. A dictatorship is when a single human being controls all the levers of power. I would a whopping 5 years ago, I still would have called China a one-party state, meaning a singular political party has all the levers of power, but they rotate people through and it's semi-representational. But Xi Jinping has worked overtime in the last 5 to 10 years to make sure that he personally has all the power. He personally has his hands on all the levers. So it has morphed into a dictatorship. I'd probably have already talked about Vladimir Putin's Russia enough this semester that I don't have to wax poetic about how he has taken 100% control of the Russian political and economic system. So again, these guys, you may not like the term, it may not sound nice, but dictatorships are probably the best way to politically describe the dictatorial duo at this point. And they had a meeting last week. Actually, I can't remember if we talked about this last week. Was anybody here last week? Is that what we talked about? By the way, IDC, was drunk, says authoritarians love story. There you go. They can call them the authoritarian states if you don't like the word dictator. But who's in charge of an authoritarian state? A single authoritarian, which is kind of like a dictator. So the dictatorial duo met last week. And of course, Russian President Vladimir Putin was tickled pink, commie pinko, if you like, tickled pink that any other major world leader would even talk to him, since he's been dissed by all of Team West. And since his personal invasion of Ukraine just over a year ago, all of Team West has distanced themselves. The same day that Vladimir Putin, that Chinese President Xi Jinping was in Russia meeting with Putin, Putin was slapped with a International Criminal Court warrant for arrest for child trafficking, basically, war crimes. And so now Putin can't even travel to any signatory country of the ICC, that's the International Criminal Court, without being arrested, or at least challenging the authorities to arrest him. So Putin's world, while he's invading Ukraine, trying to expand the Russian world, personally, Putin's world is shrinking. There are fewer and fewer places he can even go. And even countries that haven't outright pitted themselves against Russia or outright decried the Ukrainian war, even those countries, and I'm thinking particularly of India, are kind of keeping him at arm's length right now, because while they don't necessarily support Russia's invasion of Ukraine, they're also not trying to join Team West outright. They're trying to keep their options open. But even they, those non-aligned countries, let's call them, aren't really trying to buddy up to Putin anymore. So Vladimir Putin was tickled pink that Xi Jinping came to his country and further cemented this dictatorial brofest that they have growing between them. And it really is turning into what I call the 21st century Cold War. Other countries are now being encouraged to align, or at least partner up with, the forces of freedom that are represented by Team West, let's call it, or just democracies in general, let's call it, and the authoritarian states, the dictatorial duo and all of its followers, like Kim Jong-un in North Korea. We could probably go around the globe and pick on some other places that are really keen on the authoritarian model, Belarus, perchance. So we're at the beginnings of the new 21st century Cold War, where the sides are really drawn up. I'll leave it at that for now, Brown Miller Group, because I think we did talk about this some last week. But I do want you all to understand one thing in particular. By the way, that's related to what's going on in Taiwan. That's why I'm okay burning up another 10 minutes here at the start talking about what just happened with China and Russia, because it's directly related to what's going on in Taiwan. And let me give you that backstory real quick. Not backstory, side story. The side story there is China has been watching the Russian invasion of the Vladimir Putin invasion of Ukraine with trepidation, let's say. They have not come out outright and said, we think this war is great and everybody should take territory back they feel like taking, because China likes to be seen as a peaceful country, a powerful country on the rise, but in a peaceful path, that's not just going to go take over states by force. Now, what particular state is everybody worried China's going to take over by force? Hey, Taiwan! And that gets back to what we're talking about tonight. So the political drama happening between the dictatorial duo, the tightening of that team and tightening into a team that's now going to be one side of the 21st century Cold War, that's intentional. And China's doing this and tangentially supporting Russia because, of course, China has its aspirations to reclaim Taiwan back. It considers Taiwan part of its historic territory, much exactly the same way Vladimir Putin said Ukraine is historically part of Russian territory, and we're just going to go take them back. The Taiwan situation is much more complicated, though, because, again, Vladimir Putin's Russia no longer cares about the rules. They don't care about pissing off the other countries at the UN, or they don't care about pissing off the ICC. They don't care about war crimes. They don't care about killing civilians. I'm not saying this because I'm trying to paint this bleak picture of Vladimir Putin's Russia. I'm just saying they obviously do not care about the rules of sovereignty, the recognition that all of the countries of the world have had with their own political borders and others' political borders since World War II. This is the international law and international order as we have come to know it for 70 years. Vladimir Putin doesn't care about anymore, and he's going old school. By that I mean he's going so old school, he's like, I don't care about the rules since World War II. I went up the old school way where I'm a powerful country and I can just go snatch whatever territory I feel like because might makes right. Vladimir Putin is the only one to do this pretty much since, gosh, I guess Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait, where he tried to get old school, and then the rest of the world came and smacked his ass back down to the 10th century. They took him really old school. So for 70 years, most countries on planet Earth have said, no, this is a new world order. We just don't go around taking other countries, even if it's based on historical precedent. China respects that, but they also want Taiwan back. So they're weighing it out right now of they have been very patient. And this is just the Boyer assessment, China does not want to pull a Ukraine here. China does not want to invade Taiwan. China does not want to take Taiwan back by force. China does not want to do those things because China does not want to get dismissed, alienated, and embargoed by the rest of the world, like what's happening to Vladimir Putin's Russia right now. So it may, at the end of the day, China may decide to take back Taiwan by force anyway. And in doing so, they would join Russia in saying, we don't care about international rules. We don't care about the international order. We don't care about anything. And most of us don't think China's going to do that. That's not China's style. They play the long game and they want to get Taiwan back, and they're willing to wait it out until it's an advantageous process occurs that will make it happen bloodlessly. And that gets us back to the Taiwan story. So what's going on about Taiwan in the world in the last 48 hours that it caught my attention? Well, another country just switched its recognition of sovereignty from Taiwan to China. It just happened yesterday. And before I get to that, I'm sorry, I already missed a bunch of comments because you guys are so awesome. First time chatter from Chris Mack 532 says, you remind me of Kramer from Seinfeld. If Kramer from Seinfeld was a professor. Well, thank you, Jerry. Ethan Boyd 6 says, was it the Blues Brother? Ethan Boyd 6, please email me right now. You just got yourself 3 points for the correct quote. On what types of music do you usually play here, ma'am? Oh, we got both types, country and western. Well played, Ethan Boyd. James Dean, says, what's the deal with airline food? I got nothing on you there, brother. IDCI was Greedy Airlines' love story. James Dean, just had a milestone achieved. Watched 3 consecutive streams this month and sparked it with a watch streak. Thank you, James Dean. 3 in a row. Have I showed up for 3 in a row? Have I done 3 in a row? The Turd Maestro is back in the hizzle. Welcome back, Maestro. And Livia26 says, has anything significant or important happened between Taiwan and China since the Taiwan video for China 4? Yes, Livia, that's why I wanted to do this particular podcast tonight. And the last comment before I get to the first story from Brown Miller Group that says, once Taiwan Semiconductor Company builds a semiconductor plant in Arizona, will we really care if China attacks Taiwan? We can't defend it right. Well, there's a whole lot packed into that series of questions, Brown Miller Group. I'll start with the last one first. Can we defend Taiwan? Certainly we can. Absolutely we can. The U.S. has one of the mightiest militaries in the world and the second largest nuclear arsenal. Of course we can. What you meant to ask is, will the United States defend Taiwan? That's the question we're not really sure about, but most observers would say no. The U.S. supplies Taiwan, or sells Taiwan. I shouldn't say supplies. That sounds like we're giving it away for free, and we're not. But the United States, you should know this up front, does have a long-standing kind of, not a military pact, but kind of a defense organization understanding with Taiwan. The United States does sell Taiwan lots of weaponry. Not every weapon on planet Earth, not every single thing. We wouldn't sell them a nuclear missile that would infuriate China and perhaps spark a war immediately. But the U.S. does sell Taiwan tons and tons and billions and trillions of dollars of defensive weaponry, and probably even some offensive ones, because, there's a defensive jets, but then you put a missile on them, and now they're offensive jets. So it's potato on that stuff. The United States has had a long-standing relationship with Taiwan. Since 1949, the United States recognized Taiwan, the leaders of Taiwan, as the official rulers of all of China. That switched in 1972, or was 1971, 1971. The United States formally said, we can't really pretend that this little island off the coast of this giant country is actually in charge of that giant country. And so the United States and the United Nations followed suit, gave representation and street cred to the PRC, that is the People's Republic of China. That's China that you think about on a map. And so it was in 1971 that China proper, call it that, China proper, that China proper got the seat at the United Nations. It had been, before that point, had formerly been a person from Taiwan sat at the United Nations seat with a name plaque saying China in front of them. So the U.S. officially said, we're not dismissing Taiwan in 1971, but we are recognizing that Taiwan does not control China, and that China proper controls itself, and that China proper is a country called China that we now have formal recognition of, and we agree is a sovereign state. That doesn't mean the United States abandoned Taiwan, though. They did not. They said, no. Taiwan is a democracy. They're a U.S. ally of sorts. We are still going to sell them defensive weapons, and sometimes even do dual joint military training with. But now we're talking about from 1971. Less and less of that has been occurring because as China proper has grown bigger and bigger and bigger, the United States has not been trying to start a war over Taiwan. So the U.S. has had this very unique relationship with Taiwan, let's call it. And the United States likes to support Taiwan because Taiwan is a democracy. The United States also likes to support Taiwan because, as Brown Miller Group so very appropriately pointed out, Taiwan makes like 60 or 70% of all the iPhones. I think it's something like that. Or it's either the iPhones or the chip that goes into iPhones. Taiwan is a major chip maker for planet Earth. Taiwan is a technology hub, and it has been since the 70s. And it was called one of the Asian tigers back in the day. Their economy is fully developed. They're, I won't say super rich, but they're a fully developed country that's a democracy, and it's capitalist, so it looks like it belongs on Team West. Again, if you're looking at the whole world in the new 21st century Cold War. However, it is claimed historically by China, and by all rights, it will someday likely peacefully revert to China. And that gets us back to the stories. What's been going on? Well, this first right here, Honduras breaks historic ties with Taiwan and recognizes China proper. And how did I lose that? So, Katie, how come this isn't turning here? I'm clicking on a different thing, but it's only sticking with...
That's odd.
Yeah. I don't know how to remedy that.
Weird.
Hang on, folks. Technical difficulty.
Strange.
Okay. I'll just go off the fly. I don't care. Just if I. Oh, okay. How'd you do that?
Yeah, now it's not. Now it's too big. Hang on a second.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it's fine. No one needs to see my big ass head.
There we go.
And Turd Meister says, "Excuse me, Professor. I prefer you say Chinese Taipei." That's too awesome. Okay. So the story that I first pulled up here was the one that hit first yesterday. And that is that the story I just told you, I was doing that on purpose. That's what us educator types do. We sneak shit in on you. And so, while I was telling you the story about the United States, used to fully support and recognize Taiwan as the leaders of all of China, but that became increasingly, dorky. And so, 1971, Richard Nixon visited. Is that 1970? Richard Nixon, U.S. president, visited Mao Zedong's China, established formal relations. 1971, the United States recognized China's sovereignty. Same year, China got the seat at the United Nations. So when they joined the kind of global order properly, let's call it 1971. However, not all countries followed suit with the United States. And so there were a lot of states around the world that said, well, China proper, and by the way, it's called the PRC, the People's Republic of China, but I just call it proper China. The PRC, which is the Communist Party, the Communist China, the PRC was communist and did lead an authoritarian state. And so there were a lot of other states on planet Earth that said, no, we're not going to recognize them. We're going to continue to support Taiwan. And let's say 1970, maybe it was 100 countries, and I'm just making figures up because it doesn't matter. But let's say 1970, there was 100 countries that said, no, we recognize Taiwan, we don't recognize China. And by 1980, it was 80 countries recognized Taiwan, and 20 then had switched to recognize China. And let's call it by 2000, it was only about 40 countries that recognized Taiwan. You see where I'm going with this. And so as China has grown more and more powerful and used its clout to pressure countries around the world, by the way, and pressure it has done, especially in the 21st century, as China's economy has blown up and it's become the second, soon to be the biggest economy on planet Earth, and the workshop of the world, and a huge exporter and a big money maker, and its economic clout has made all countries want to trade with it. With that economic clout has come power. And so China, for all of this time, has said, we refuse to do any business with countries that recognize Taiwan. So if your country recognizes Taiwan, we won't do any trade deals with you. You're going to miss out on this sweet, sweet-ass Chinese trade. And that, along with diplomatic pressure, for all countries that kept recognizing Taiwan, China has, for 20 to 30 to 40 years now, applied diplomatic pressure, economic pressure, put in political and economic teasers and incentives, including going around the world and building bridges and donating to charities and building railroad stations and soccer stadiums in Central Asia and parts of Africa. Almost a goodwill tour, mostly with an economic base to why they're doing it. And slowly but surely, more and more countries, because they felt the irresistible urge to trade with China, have abandoned their recognition of Taiwan in favor of recognizing China proper. And I shouldn't summarize it. That's almost too much of a generalization. There were some countries that were like, no, we want to trade with China, but we consider China a sovereign state, but we also consider Taiwan a sovereign state. Even those countries, China would say, nope, we're not doing trade with you until you renounce that Taiwan is a sovereign state, because China has said since 1949 they're not a sovereign state. They are never been a sovereign state. They're a part of China. They're a renegade province of China, if you want to use the technical Chinese terms. So what happened yesterday? Honduras was the most recent country to flip-flop on its recognition of Taiwan. And it was only, as of 2 days ago, there were only 14 countries that still recognize Taiwan as sovereign and independent. And now here we are Monday afternoon / Monday evening, and now the number's down to 13. And in fact, it's only 12 countries that still recognize Taiwan's sovereignty, and Vatican City. So it's 13 international entities, sovereign states, and the Vatican City are the only ones that are left. A couple more of them actually are in Central America, and that's important for a story I'll click on in just a minute. Everybody with me so far? Any questions? So slowly but surely, since 1949, more and more countries, sovereign states, have pulled their recognition of Taiwan's sovereignty back in order to appease China. Or they just maybe kind of like the United States. The United States didn't do it to appease China. They just did it because they're like, well, we're a big world power. China's kind of a big world power. It just makes sense. We have to renounce recognizing Taiwanese sovereignty. By the way, the United States all this time has said, by all means, if Taiwan wants to become independent, can fight for it and get it, we'll recognize them. But the United States is not actively encouraging it. And just so you know, the United States has been most actively discouraging Taiwan from continuing to declare independence. And there have been politicians, a whole political party. There's two very powerful political parties in Taiwan. It's basically a two-party system, just like America. They're not called Democrats and Republicans, but it's two major parties that are split about 50-50 in the country. One of them is a semi-pro-Taiwanese independence party, and the other one is more of a, let's not try to declare independence because that'll get us shot at and killed. So the other party is not necessarily huge pro-China, but they're more pro-reunification, let's call it. Let's start to sort things out with Mother China, and eventually we're going to reunite. So that's the political parties within the country, and we'll get to the specifics about those in just a second. The thing to think about here that I brought up, though, is the United States, when there have been very, very heavily pro-independence leaders in Taiwan who have rattled the cage and said, we want to declare, we want to the United Nations to have a vote to recognize Taiwan's sovereignty. It's actually been the United States. It's like, whoa, slow your roll, Taiwan. Let's not shake the sovereignty cage. We're not trying to start a war with China, so chill. And again, there have been in times past, not that long ago, by the way, a exceptionally pro-independence guy who became the president of Taiwan, and the U.S. rebutted him multiple times. Even wanted to come to the United States on a trip or have a diplomatic mission or do something else, and then the United States is the one that said, no, we're not trying to start a fight here. We support Taiwan getting its due respect. We support Taiwan's democracy. We support its independent economy. We are a big part of their economy. They're more tied in with us than they are with China. However, the United States does not support it to the point of, hey, let's start a war over Taiwan. So that's the backstory of that. So take home here, Honduras, the number of states that recognize Taiwan's sovereignty has gone from 14 to 13, and look for that number to continue to shrink. I'm surprised no one's asked, why does China care? That's usually the question students ask me. Why is China working so hard? Who cares about 13 or 14 states? Who cares if it was 30 or 40 states that recognize Taiwan? Why would China care? Can't China just go over there and overrun Taiwan in 5 minutes and take over the Allied force? Yes, they could. But they don't want to. That's what I was referring to earlier. Most analysts say, look, China, if China wanted to take this place by force, it could at any time. Let's just be realistic. China has the biggest standing army on planet Earth. That is the most number of humans in boots holding guns. China has the biggest standing army. China is a nuclear power now. China has all of the best, if not all the best, close to all of the best of the wartime technologies and jets and submarines and nuclear power and nuclear-powered submarines and attack helicopters. They have an aircraft carrier. We just have to be realistic. They could overrun Taiwan fairly quickly. I wouldn't even say it'll be bloodless. There will be some people that get killed. But unlike Vladimir Putin's running over Ukraine, which he thought was going to be simple, and again, a lot of us from the outside thought that Russia would dominate it fairly quickly too. That turned out to be a horrible prediction because none of us understood how utterly clueless the Russian military was. And we also wildly underestimated the fury that the Ukrainian people would have and their willingness to go to the streets with guns and defend their country. I'm not making fun of people in Taiwan. They might want to defend their country just as voraciously. But by all accounts, not even half of them would do that. And Taiwan is a much smaller place than Ukraine. It does have a lot of military capacity, mostly defensive. But we have to, again, just in the cold light of day, call the facts as you can see them. And if China wanted to dominate Taiwan, it could easily do it. And it would do it much quicker, much more effective, with much more overwhelming force than Vladimir Putin brought to the Ukrainian game. Okay? James Dean says Russian military was a victim of corruption, narcissism, and the tendency to have horrendous logistical networks relying on foreign-made components for all their hardware. Well said, James Dean. China makes all of its own stuff, or virtually all of it. And they've got a lot of it on standby. So, yeah, China's war machine has been growing and ramping up. It was in its infancy 25, 35 years ago. It's still growing, and it is vibrant. It is strong, and they are adding to it every day. So it's not to be underestimated. I mean, everyone's mostly worried about the 21st century Cold War, that China and the United States are the ones that are going to go to war with the biggest firepower on planet Earth and kill the whole planet. That's a much bigger fear. And if you understand the reality of that, or the possibility of that, then you also understand the possibility and reality of how overwhelming a Chinese invasion of Taiwan would be. It would be a one-sided game. Not the least of which, let me stress for the third time, that about half, if not more, of the Taiwanese people kind of might be okay with it. Not even okay like can't wait for China to invade, but kind of, and it's called the KMT, by the way. The KMT, the Kuomintang, is the big political party. Let's call it the conservative political party of Taiwan. And it's about half the population supports the KMT. And the KMT is, strangely enough, it was the founding political party of Taiwan that ran away from the commies. But over time, they're the ones that are now more apt to warm ties with China and want to have an easier strategic and economic partnership with China. And about half the people of Taiwan support that right now. That is not something you could say about Ukraine. Ukraine, 90% of the people are like, hell no, we hate Russia. And only 10% of them are like, we love Russia because we're Russian. We just happen to be over here on the eastern fringe of this place called Ukraine, but we would like to rejoin Russia. And that's what happened. That's not what's going to happen in Taiwan. Anyway, let me get to some of the stuff I'm talking about to reinforce this. What I just said, the KMT, the Kuomintang, is a major political party. And what is also happening today that I had not heard about until it was announced this morning is Taiwan's ex-president, a KMT dude, former president, is in China today visiting China. Now, why am I saying that like it's a big deal? Because it is a big deal. It's a very big deal. Why is it such a big deal? Because it's the first time since 1949 when this rift occurred between China proper and Taiwan. It's the first time in modern history since 1949 that an active or even a former president of Taiwan or China has visited the other country. So this is kind of a biggie. And again, it's happening. People like me don't believe in coincidences. So it's probably not a coincidence that this visit occurred the day that Honduras changed its allegiance to China proper, which of course much hay was made out of this in China all weekend and all day today. Of like, yay, China's awesome. China's a world power. Yet another country has seen the wisdom of not recognizing Taiwan's sovereignty. This is a big boon. This is a big, not even propaganda. It's just a big rah-rah, China's awesome news story that's been floating around everywhere. And so what happened was that the guy's name is Ma Ying-yao. Ma Ying-zhou. Let's call it Ma Ying-zhou. It's easier. Ma Ying-zhou. President Ma. Good old Ma. I called him back in the day when I used to report more on world leaders in live lectures. Former President Ma Ying-zhou Landing in China on Monday for the first visit to the country by any sitting or former Taiwanese leader since China's civil war ended with the nationalist government retreating to the island from the mainland in 1949. Maybe I should have started with some of this too, but I assume that most of the people are in class right now and just watch these lectures on China and Taiwan, or you're former students, and so you knew this stuff already. But I should have given the background that the reason Taiwan is in this weird status here in 2023 is that China went through what's called a century of humiliation. It's a period of humiliation. Being overrun by foreign powers. They still had an old school monarchy / emperor. All there was corruption within that. The dynasty was being destroyed. China was coming into the modern era. We're talking about 1900. And it was just overrun by foreigners. It was a political wreck. It was an economic wreck. It was devolving rapidly. And that's when they fell into a civil war between people that wanted to overthrow the old system, let's call them communists, and people that either wanted to defend the old system or transform it into something closer to a representative democracy, which was bandied about from 1900 to 1910 all the way to 1918. So those forces, and the KMT was actually the force that was fighting against the CCP, the Chinese Communist. So the Chinese Communists, the ones that end up being the Chinese political party that is running China proper, they under Mao Zedong, they were the communists fighting against the KMT, or the nationalists they were called. And I won't get to all the details of the war because you probably already know them. But at the end of it, the KMT, the nationalists, fled. They were losing. Mao Zedong's commies were winning. And the commies pushed them out. And the remnants of the nationalist party, the nationalist army, whatever you want to call it, fled to Taiwan in 1949. They set up shop and said, by the way, we didn't lose the Civil War. We're just here hanging out until we retake the mainland. And that's why you kind of had two Chinas for a little while. China proper, real China, communist China, and the Nationalist Party, which becomes the KMT China, which was in charge of just Taiwan. Again, the Nationalist Party originally was saying, hey, we might become a democracy. We want to incorporate ourselves into the capitalist rest of the world economy. And so the Nationalists were supported by the United States and other Team West players. And so when they retreated to Taiwan, the Western democracies recognized it. They're like, good, good. We wanted that side to win anyway. Too bad they didn't. But we'll recognize them as being the proper rulers of China from this island we call Taiwan now. And the rest, as we say, is history. Now you're all caught up. That's why Western countries, so many of them, recognized Taiwan for so long. But by 1970s, most of them are like, okay, we can't, this facade has gone on for 20 years. We can't keep pretending the Taiwanese are in charge of China. They're not. But it's also why, from the Chinese perspective, China said, no, we won the Civil War. Taiwan was part of our country before the Civil War. Taiwan is part of China proper, and we will take them back. We all caught up now? Okay, good. Brown Miller Group says, well, I didn't know that, and also says, do you think they want the same arrangement as Hong Kong and Macau? Yes, they were very patient to get Hong Kong and Macau retransferred back to them without any use of force, and that's what they're trying to do here in Taiwan as well. So you see from the picture here, that's former Taiwanese President Ma Ying-jeou, who actually met with the Chinese President Xi Jinping in Singapore. So they weren't in Taiwan and they weren't in China either, but he met him at a conference in Singapore back in 2015. See if I can remember my dates. President Mao was in charge of Taiwan from 2008 to 2016, I believe. I think he did 2 terms. He was a KMT guy. And again, there's this great, almost delicious irony that the KMT, they were the nationalists. They were the ones that were fighting against communism. They're the ones that lost the Civil War. They're the ones that retreated to Taiwan. And they were like, no, we hate commies, and we're now in charge of Taiwan until we can retake the mainland. And over time, the KMT has become the conservative party. And now, 100 years later, not even 100, 70 years later, the KMT is now the conservative party that's saying, hey, we might want to we actually favor reestablishing relations with China economically. And we probably are kind of going to be okay with an eventual reunification. So their whole political aspirations have come almost completely full circle. And now they're like, well, the group that we were running away from, we're actually kind of okay with joining them now. And it's because China's gotten so much more powerful and so much more popular and so much more economically powerful in the last 70 years. So and Taiwan's this little island right off their coast. So it makes sense. And President Ma Ying-jeou, he came to power as the leader of the KMT and kind of was the first one, especially in this century, to start warming up ties with China again. He opened up straight trade again. They reestablished flights. There were no direct flights between these two places for half a century. And under Mao, they opened that back up. And he kind of, his policies were kind of popular because opened up trade and travel, and families got reunified across the Taiwanese Straits. And it looked like the country was getting led into the situation of like, it looks like it's going to be a peaceful reabsorption and not a war. But he ended up pissing off a lot of people in his country when he tried to push through a really big economic package with China that people protested about in 2014, 2015. I think it was called the Sunflower Protest, but don't quote me on that. Go Google it. And he ended up, not disgraced, but he lost a lot of popularity. People thought he pushed too hard, too fast to reunify with China. So the KMT, his political party, lost big in 2016 to the other political party, which has been turned into more of a pro-democracy, pro-independent Taiwan party. You see where I'm going with this now. Back to this story, that's why it's a big deal. That in the same day Honduras switched from Taiwan to China, a former president of Taiwan visits China. Now, he has said this is not an official state visit. I'm actually not even going to meet with any of the leaders. We'll wait and see if that's true, by the way. I think he will end up meeting with somebody. But he's like, no, this is just a goodwill ambassador tour. He likes the limelight. He likes the limelight a bit as well, so that's part of it. But that's what he's doing. And he's seen now as an ambassador for the KMT party to be like, hey, dudes, the KMT party's lost the last two major presidential elections in Taiwan, by the way. And that means that the pro-independence, pro-democracy political party has been winning. But the tides are turning right now, as they often do in politics. So the KMT actually just dominated local elections a couple of years ago. And it looks like it's time that the KMT will take the presidency back in an election that's going to happen in less than 10 months. So it's another reason you're seeing this dude. You're like, doesn't this seem like a complete non-story from a distance? You're like, oh, some former president goes to China. Who gives a shit? But it's like, no. This is interlaced with all kinds of diplomatic implications, not just for China, not just for the United States, and not even just for Taiwan, because remember, lots of different countries are starting to side up in this 21st century Cold War now. And so former President Ma in China kind of starting to, giving little massages to people, trying to warm them up and saying, hey, there are a lot of us in Taiwan that are looking forward to working more closely with Mother China, with China proper. And that is helping in the strategy for his KMT political party back home in the upcoming elections, which I'll go out on a limb and tell you they're probably going to win. So you're going to see a more pro-China, or at least a softer stance towards China president of Taiwan in the next 10 months. That's a prediction, but it looks like they're on par to do it. And that's a game changer, because you have to have a pro-China, or at least a soft pro-China president, changes the equation of, will these two countries go to war? Will the United States get pulled into a war? Well, obviously not if you have a president and a political establishment that kind of thinks it's okay to warm back up to China. See where I'm going with this? This is why it's a big deal. First time chatter from Joey Silva Camillo, who says, in your opinion, what is the most likely outcome of all this? I think I just gave it without even reading your question. To me, it looks like the KMT will take back the presidency and will start to set the stage for increasing economic ties. They're already there because President Ma is the one that helped put them in place back in his tenure, 2008 to 2016. They're going to increase those ties. I think. I mean, that's a prediction. The other thing about Taiwan is that I mentioned earlier, or that actually it was a Brown Miller Group who brought it up, is that they make a lot of chips. They make a lot of technology, and they make a lot of technology the United States buys. So Taiwan is in this very unique position that most people that understand economic things would say China would never attack Taiwan. Taiwan's value is this multi-trillion-dollar semiconductor, transistor, computer, iPhones industry. Why would you blow that up? That's the value. I think what you're going to see Taiwan do is say, hey, we want to establish peaceful relations back with China, and with a 100-year plan of reunification. I'm just making numbers up. Let's have a 100-year plan of reunification, but we want to embed in that we're still going to sell tons of chip technology to what are now China's adversaries. And that's why Brown Miller Group, by the way, says once Taiwan Semiconductor Company builds a semiconductor plant in Arizona, will we really even care if China invades Taiwan? I think what you're going to see, Brown Miller Group is dead to rights on this. You're going to see Taiwan start to diversify and move some of its operations out of Taiwan, especially because it's a democracy and it's a capitalist democracy. So those companies are privately owned. And those companies can say, hey, I don't like the political climate. If China is going to take back over our country, we should move our company somewhere else. So you're going to see some of that happening too. But Taiwan's in a really interesting place that it has stuff that everybody wants. China wants it supposedly for historic reasons, but China will take that semiconductor industry as well. And China would like to have that semiconductor industry so that Taiwan's not supplying all those parts to China's adversaries. So it actually, to me, makes war much less likely because everybody wants Taiwan intact. Nobody wants to blow it up. Nobody really wants a world war, we hope. So Taiwan's in the position of being in a catbird seat saying, hey, this could go in a lot of different ways. And it really, unlike really any other country on planet Earth right now, with the possible exception of Russia, the person in charge of it, really, the single person who's the president of Taiwan, will have a magnified position of power to determine what path Taiwan will go on in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's why that Taiwanese presidential election that's coming up in 10 months is super important. It really will. It's a political, it'll be a political campaigns. It's a presidential election cycle, which are pretty boring in our country, by the way. We don't really talk about anything besides, we hate you, and yeah, we hate you. That's U.S. political stuff. But in Taiwan, it's a much bigger deal because it's going to be presented as two different paths, truly distinct paths that Taiwan will have in front of it for its immediate and long-term future. And the voters will decide. The voters will decide. Right now, I think the edge goes to the KMT, the Kuomintang. Now, I'm already almost at time, and we have to get to the basketball game. But the funny thing is at the same time, President Ma, former Honduras, switches allegiance away from Taiwan. Former President Ma visits China and to facilitate a power transfer to his own political party, which is much more pro-Chinese. At the same time, the current president of Taiwan, President Tsai Ing-wen, is getting ready to visit the United States. It's just delicious that all this stuff is happening. Now, her political party, and it's the is it DDP? DDP. Let me see for that. I always try to keep these things on hand. Chinese. I always forget the name of the. Let's see if I can just find the lady. See, there it is. And she is the DPP. I'm sorry, DPP. The Democratic Progressive Party is the other political party that I've referenced in passing. So that's the KMT, the one that has come full circle in the last 70 years and might be more pro-China right now. and their adversaries, the other political party, is the DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party, which has held the presidency for the last 8 years and has held the presidency off and on since Taiwan's been Taiwan. And over time, it originally was fighting back against the KMT themselves, because the KMT kind of was a more militaristic party right when it started up, because they had all the power. They just were in a civil war with Mao Zedong's communist. I know I'm giving you too many facts right now, but if you're interested in this stuff, here's why it's important. The DPP started as kind of a more true democratic movement within Taiwan, and this is in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and gained more power. And it really wasn't until the 1990s you had kind of true multi-party elections in Taiwan really turned into something we call a full-fledged democracy, a mature democracy. And ever since then, the favored party has gone back and forth. But the DPP has always been kind of pro-democracy, pro-international, and because it's the opposite party of the KMT, has increasingly become more pro-independent, pro-Taiwanese independence, I should say. So Tsai Ing-wen is on her second term, and it's only two-termers, just like the United States presidents. So she's got to go, and she will be leaving. But before she goes, she's going to visit the United States, which is usually a big no-no. Again, the United States says, hey, we're not trying to piss off China. We don't officially recognize Taiwan as a sovereign state. We don't have a diplomatic seat for them here in Washington. It's not a head of state to head of state visit if they ever come here. But by the way, we're never inviting them. So you never see Taiwanese leaders come to the United States because no one wants to piss off China. She's not officially actually even going to go to the United States. She's going to, let's see, where is she going to? President Tsai will leave Taiwan on Wednesday for a trip to Central America with what officials have described as transit stops in the United States planned in New York and Los Angeles. So they're pulling a tricky diplomatic move here. She's going to visit the two other countries in Central America that still recognize Taiwanese sovereignty. And she'll probably be going to the other 10 countries on planet Earth in the next 10 months to also visit the last 10 to 12 countries that recognize Taiwanese sovereignty. So that's why she's going, but they're pulling a fast one and saying, no, she's not going to the United States, but her flight is going through Los Angeles. So she'll be there for a little while, and she might meet with a leader of the Speaker of the House while she's there. So not an official state visit. China, of course, has condemned this and been pissed off and lots of other things. But that's how these diplomatic things work. So Taiwan's former KMT president, pro-China, is visiting China, while the current president, who is the DPP, pro-independence group, is visiting Guatemala, Belize, and the United States this week. And now that's the rest of the story. That's what's going on here behind the scenes. She will try to galvanize more U.S. support and to further galvanize the last dozen countries that still recognize Taiwanese independence as a bid to say, hey, we, the free democracies of the world and the open market capitalists, should all stick together, and you should support Taiwan because, by the way, we also make tons of chips that all of you need for all your phones and defense equipment and missiles and lots of other things. So this is why, to me, it was a very interesting group of stories that got put together. Let me see if there's any other ones. And at the same time, I'll just reference these in passing. There were some cables in the Matsu Islands, I think are just north of Taiwan, that China cut off internet cables to earlier today. And you're like, well, why would they do that? Well, this other story might help you understand that, and that is maybe China's practicing how to sever Taiwan's internet connections in case of a full military conflagration, or is just even a Cold War tactic between China and Taiwan of like, well, we can isolate you if you do things we don't like. If you elect in the next election cycle, elect a huge pro independence candidate who becomes president, We will not take kindly to that. I'm speaking on behalf of the Chinese government, and there are things we can do to make your lives miserable. By the way, side note, China already almost daily does routine military jet drills all around Taiwan, all across the Taiwanese Straits. They routinely, maybe every day, do naval boat patrols and naval military exercises all around Taiwan, pretty much all the time, pretty much every day. So, and sometimes they even do practice missile. We're testing a missile that we accidentally missiled right across the Taiwanese airspace. You get the drift of why these things are happening. It's a flagrant show of force, of overwhelming military preparedness and readiness. And they can cut your cables off too. And this is why China fights so hard and has for so long to get no other countries to recognize Taiwanese sovereignty. And therefore, if China can get that number down to 0, that no other countries, including Vatican City, actually recognize Taiwan as a sovereign state, well then, if China were to take it over, it has not broken any international law because no one recognizes Taiwan as a sovereign state. And most folks would say, yeah, there's some historic precedent to China's claim that it's part of China. By the way, I'm not one of those people. China actually lost Taiwan to Japan during the World War II era. And Taiwan only was tangentially incorporated into China back in, say, 1600. So historically, you can't even say, oh, well, Taiwan's been part of China for 10,000 years. No, it really hasn't. And even when it was kind of tangentially absorbed in, say, 1600 and 1700 or 1800s, Taiwan was no great crown jewel of China. It was basically a fisherman's island. So China really cared that much about Taiwan. Why does it care so much now? Well, because China's powerful. And Taiwan is a big island that is literally just a few miles off their coast. And if Taiwan were to gain independence, gain sovereignty, it's already allied with the United States and lots of other Western countries, and therefore the United States and other Western countries could sell them nuclear weapons and stick them on the island. That's an extreme scenario, but you get my drift. China says this is a strategic and military and defensive liability. We have to control Taiwan. Guess what, United States? You would never allow China to go take over, Baja California. That would be a strategic impossibility. The United States would never allow that. Great Britain would never allow China to go buy Ireland. I mean, that's unheard of. You'd be like, no, you're not going to have something that close to us. And that's China's argument of like, hey, we can't have an island that is literally a stone's throwing distance from us, that's siding up with another team on planet Earth, a team that might arm them to the teeth, especially with a nuclear weapon. By the way, this is the exact same argument that Vladimir Putin has been making about Ukraine. And that's why Vladimir Putin said they had to invade Ukraine, because they had to go invade this country that's right next door to them, that the Western countries were going to put all these weapons in and threaten Russia's integrity and threaten Russia's security. I mean, that's not my assessment. That's what Vladimir Putin said. And China looks at that and says, we agree with that. That's why China has not denounced Russia's aggressive invasion of Ukraine, because China says, hey, we understand. We understand that a country that borders you, that's right next to you, that may be playing for the other side, that's intolerable from a defensive and security standpoint. We can't have that. But hopefully you learned some stuff today. And if there are any other, I'm sorry, I have a first-time chatter. I'm so sorry, first-time chatter. Ophi Lofi Dude. Thank you for chatting, Ophi Lofi. Who says, hey, Professor, former recent student of world regions and geography of wine. Welcome back, Ophi Lofi. Hope all is going well. It is. I got my degree in a STEM major, but ended up working for a Napa wine company. I've continued to love geopolitics and have become a real geography junkie in particular. Thanks for all you taught me. Cheers. Well, thank you so much, Ophi Lofi. And I know it's almost time, or actually the game is starting up. So for anybody that's made it for the full hour of the online Twitch office hour, the password is, let's see if I can put it up here again. So you can, what's that? Well, of course the game's running late. That's why I wasn't too bad. The password is Tsai Ing-wen. Tsai Ing-wen will be your password tonight. If you email me that, Tsai Ing-wen, right this second, it is 9:05. You had exactly 1 minute to email me that with your real name and your screen name here in Twitch, and you just got yourself 10 points. Thank you all for tuning in. Unless there are other questions, it's been a quiet crowd tonight. Usually, you all are asking me 10 million questions, but that's cool. That means I got through a whole bunch of material and a bunch of news stories, and hopefully you learned some stuff. So, unless there's any other questions, I'll open it up for question time right this second. Or is there any points of clarification you needed in the whole Taiwan turbulence? And now maybe it also makes more sense what I was saying at the top of the hour, which is it's not really so much turbulence that's happening in Taiwan. It's turbulence that's happening all around Taiwan. So a former Taiwanese leader in China, the current Taiwanese leader going to the United States, Honduras, a Central American country, renouncing Taiwanese independence or in sovereignty. So whole lot going on, and a Taiwanese presidential election happening T-minus 10 months that will, I won't say decide the outcome, but it certainly will decide what path Taiwan gets on for the coming 5 to 10 years. And those two paths will lead to two extraordinarily different possible outcomes for the island and therefore the world. Will it be a peaceful transgression, transformation, a reintegration into China proper, or will it end in war? Thanks, James Dean, for thanking me. Thank you as well, Brown Miller Group. Thank you, M.O. Wafa 3. I learned a lot tonight myself. So thank you all for tuning in as always. Out there in the Twitch world, I am signing off. John Boyer, President, CEO, and Professor of World Regional Geography, Geog 1014, here at Virginia Tech, home of the Fighting Lady Hokies. Let's all tune in to them and see how they play. Party on, as always.